The threat assessment had been running for 4 minutes and 11 seconds by the time Isabella Sterling told him that someone with his apparent intellectual limitations must find the work remarkably peaceful. And Ethan Carter nodded politely and calculated the angle from the nearest gunman to their table. 3 men entered at staggered intervals, casual but too casual, the way people perform casualness when they have rehearsed it. The first had chosen a table near the service entrance. The second positioned himself diagonally across the room. The third sat closest to the door, and his right hand had not touched his coffee cup once in 4 minutes, which told Ethan exactly where his attention actually was. Triangulation. Overlapping fields. They had done this before. Isabella was still talking. Her voice was a precision instrument, and she was using it with the practiced efficiency of someone who had decided, somewhere en route to this meeting, that the most useful thing she could do with the next hour was establish a dominance hierarchy and eliminate any ambiguity about her position within it. She had looked at his shirt, his hands, the faint oil stain on his left cuff, and had assembled a verdict in approximately 4 seconds. The verdict was legible in every syllable. "Just a mechanic," she had said when she sat down. The word hung between them like something she had thrown with the specific intention of watching it land. Ethan had filed this. He had also filed the way her fingers drummed against the table in a pattern suggesting someone who maintained a chemical relationship with anxiety, the way her eyes tracked the room the same way his did, not with pleasure, but with compulsion. Something had happened to her. He recognized the signatures of it from mirrors. The man near the service entrance shifted in his chair. His jacket moved wrong. 8 feet to the nearest table. 12 to the kitchen, 15 to the exit. The ceramic creamer pitcher on the table between them weighed approximately 3/4 of a pound. Ethan said, "Yesterday I thought about fluid dynamics, how brake fluid behaves under extreme pressure, how systems designed to stop something can fail catastrophically when one component is compromised." He held her gaze. "Also thought about my daughter's science project on Venus. The atmospheric pressure there would crush a human in seconds." Isabella's smile flickered. She had been expecting deflection, or placation, or the slightly wounded withdrawal of someone whose inadequacy had been correctly identified. This was none of those things. Isabella Sterling had built her fortress from specific materials. The stone had come from the corner of St. Patrick's Cathedral, where she had stood for 27 minutes in a $40,000 dress, understanding incrementally that the man she was waiting for had been gone since early morning. 200 guests had watched her realize it. She had stood very still while the organ continued playing the same processional on repeat, and she had thought, never again. Not never again as in never love again. She was too clear-eyed for that simplicity. She meant something more precise and more dangerous. Never again occupy a position where another person's choices could publicly unmake her. Never again stand in a space designed for vulnerability while others held the power to determine the outcome. She had rebuilt herself from the foundation up. The redesign was thorough. She stopped caring what people thought about her methods and started caring only about results. She learned to identify weaknesses the way certain animals smell water, instinctively at a distance, before any visible evidence appeared. She learned that the most effective strategy in any interpersonal exchange was to establish, early and unambiguously, that she was not available for softness. Working-class men made her uncomfortable in a specific way she would not have been able to articulate precisely. They reminded her of the version of herself that had been soft enough to stand in a cathedral for 27 minutes, hoping. She saw in their easy manual competence the quality of a person who had not yet been sufficiently damaged to understand the necessity of armor. The oil stain on Ethan Carter's cuff was evidence of work done without the protection of distance, and distance was what she had decided, 3 years ago, was the only viable strategy. Chloe had told her this was a business contact. Chloe had described the meeting in terms of classic car restoration and networking. Chloe had been lying, which Isabella had understood approximately 40 seconds after sitting down, at which point she had decided to make the most of the hour by confirming, in detail, what she had already concluded in general. "I just closed a $300 million acquisition that will reshape the pharmaceutical industry," she said. The kind of complexity requiring years of education to comprehend. Must be exhausting, Ethan said. His tone was neutral as still water, all those lives reduced to numbers on spreadsheets. The words landed differently than she had anticipated, not aggressive, just accurate in a way that required her to recalibrate. Would you mind switching seats? Ethan said. I need to face the door. He said it in the middle of her sentence about the Tokyo Ventures portfolio, and something in his voice was different, not louder, but denser, the way the air feels before a storm resolves. Isabella looked at him. The mild, careful quality he had maintained through 40 minutes of her performance had been replaced by something she could not categorize, and her body responded to it before her mind did. She was already standing before she had decided to stand. Some macho military thing, she said, sliding into his vacated seat. Chloe mentioned you served, couldn't hack civilian life. Listen carefully, he said. He had not looked at her since she moved. His eyes were on the room. In about 30 seconds, something bad is going to happen. When it does, you go low and left toward the kitchen. Don't ask questions. Don't hesitate. Don't look back. What are you talking about? She started, and then stopped, because his face had undergone a transformation that her nerves registered as dangerous before her conscious mind had processed the visual information. The person sitting across from her was not the person who had been sitting there a moment before. She could not have explained the difference in any specific detail. It was a quality of presence, of settled, absolute attention that made the air between them feel different. The waitress never saw it coming. Her tray was balanced on her fingertips as she navigated between tables, and then it wasn't. The tray hit the floor with a sound like a small explosion, and in the instant of attention that sound directed toward the far side of the room, the man near the service entrance stood, and his jacket fell open, and the Glock 19 at his ribs was unmistakable to anyone who knew what the shape of death looked like. Ethan's hand closed around her wrist, and she was already moving. 3 guns appeared simultaneously. 3 voices, everyone on the ground. This is a robbery. Nobody moves, nobody dies. The leader's voice cracked on the last syllable, not with coldness, but with the strain of someone who had rehearsed this in theory and was discovering, in practice, that theory was inadequate preparation. Isabella's mind, which had navigated billion-dollar negotiations and hostile boardrooms and the particular brutality of venture capital culture, had no category for this. The gun pointed at the ceiling was real. The sound of a woman screaming somewhere behind her was real. She was 7 years old, hiding in her bedroom closet while her parents' marriage ended loudly in the kitchen below, and her body remembered that hiding was the right response even when the mind had no instructions to offer. Ethan's arm came around her waist, and he pulled her under the table and positioned himself between her and the nearest gunman before she had completed a single conscious decision. His body was a wall. His breathing was even. Stay down, he said. A different voice entirely now, not aggressive, not performative, but carrying a specific authority that her nervous system recognized as credible. Don't look at them. Don't be memorable. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. Do it now. She did it. She did not know why she did it. She did it. From beneath the table, pressed against the cool marble floor with his shoulder forming the boundary between her and the room, she watched him catalog the situation in real time. His eyes moved in quick, precise arcs. She could see his jaw, the lean line of muscle there, the stillness of him. 3 individuals, he said, almost to himself. Leader by the door, he keeps touching his left hand. There's a ring there. He's scared, and he's doing this anyway, which makes him unpredictable. The one by the window is in withdrawal. You can see it in the contraction of his pupils from here, which means his judgment is compromised. The third one's the youngest. He's terrifying himself. With every second, this continues. You can see all that from here? Isabella said, and her voice only shook slightly. I've been seeing it for 4 minutes, he said. The one in withdrawal, the one near the service entrance, moved toward an elderly couple and grabbed the woman's purse with enough force to send her sideways into her chair. The woman cried out. The man laughed, high and manic, the laugh of someone who had been afraid for too long and was now performing fearlessness. He was 6 feet away. Ethan reached for the ceramic pitcher on the overturned table beside them and tested its weight with the same precise assessment Isabella used on an unfamiliar dataset. When the man was close enough, Ethan moved with violence so clean it looked like choreography. The pitcher swung in an arc that was not wide, was not dramatic, was nothing but exactly sufficient. The man dropped. The gun clattered across the marble. Ethan had the weapon in his hand before it stopped sliding, checked the chamber in a motion her eyes could barely track, and said, "Kitchen, now." He had her to her feet and moving before she had processed the instruction. The world behind them erupted. A shot took the espresso machine in the space she had occupied 30 seconds earlier. Ethan's arm was around her waist, half lifting her across the kitchen threshold, and then they were behind the service counter with the relative safety of commercial-grade steel between them and the room. "Come out, hero," the leader's voice was fraying. "Come out or I start shooting civilians. 5 seconds. A child screamed. Through the service window, Isabella could see the leader had grabbed a little girl. 5 years old, maybe 6, brown curls and a striped shirt, and was pressing the gun to her temple. The child's whole body was shaking. Her mother stood 3 feet away and was making a sound that Isabella would hear for a long time afterward. 4. Ethan's jaw had gone tight. She watched him do the calculation, the terrible, precise, inhuman calculation of someone who has been trained to solve problems like this mathematically. She watched him decide. 3. "Wait," Ethan called. He was already setting the gun on the counter, visible but not abandoned. "I'm coming out. Let the girl go." He stepped into the room with his hands raised and his body open, and Isabella understood, watching him, that he was offering himself as the thing that gets hit so other things do not. He was making himself the target. The little girl was released and ran to her mother. The gun swung toward Ethan. "You killed my brother," the leader said. His voice was different now, still afraid, but underneath the fear was something rawer. "He's all I have." "He's not dead," Ethan said. His voice had not risen, his breathing had not changed. "Concussed. Possible skull fracture. But alive. I know where to hit someone to put them down without killing them. Your brother needs medical attention, but he'll survive if you end this now." The leader stared at him. He was young, early 20s, with the hollow eyes of someone carrying a weight designed for a much larger person. "They have my daughter," he said. "If I don't pay by tonight," his voice broke. "She's 7. He looked at the little girl crying in her mother's arms, seemed to actually see her, for the first time since he had grabbed her. "Tommy," Ethan said, and something changed in his voice again, warmer now, more present. "Look at me. I have a 7-year-old too. Her name's Lily. She likes dinosaurs and soccer and making her own breakfast, which mostly means cereal everywhere except the bowl." He took a single step forward. "I know what it's like to feel like you'd do anything to protect her. But this makes it worse. Not better. Whatever you owe, whoever has your daughter, this money doesn't solve it. This just adds consequences you can't undo. You don't know anything. I know you grabbed a child and let her go when you saw her face. Another step. That's not who you are." The third shooter was running out of nerve. Isabella could see it from the service window. His eyes moving too fast, his weight shifting. He saw the situation dissolving and made the only decision panic has available to it. His gun came up toward Ethan. Isabella grabbed the fire extinguisher from the kitchen wall and swung it without deciding to swing it, without thinking, without anything that could be called deliberate action. The metal cylinder connected with the side of his head and he dropped, and the gun discharged into the ceiling. And in the ringing silence that followed, Tommy raised his weapon at Ethan and said, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But I can't go to prison, my daughter." Ethan moved faster than her eyes could track. He knocked the gun hand wide, the shot taking a window instead of flesh, and they went down together across broken glass and spilled coffee. It was brief and brutal and technically precise. A strike, an elbow, a hold maintained until consciousness gave way. Ethan rolled clear, gasping, his shirt torn and bloody from the glass. He looked up. Isabella was standing over him with the fire extinguisher still raised. "I told you to run," he said. "I've never been good at following orders," she said. Her voice was shaking and she kept it anyway. "Ask anyone." The sirens arrived. The police arrived. The controlled chaos of professional response absorbed the amateur chaos that had preceded it, and somewhere in the process of sorting witnesses from suspects and injured from merely terrified, a paramedic cut away Ethan's shirt to check for injuries that he was minimizing with the automatic optimism of someone who had learned that expressing pain attracted concern he did not know how to receive. Isabella saw the scars. They were not incidental. They were a record, a map of occasions when he had been in the wrong place relative to the wrong thing and had survived because something in him refused the alternative. Bullet wounds, shrapnel, burns that had healed in the particular way burns heal, imperfectly and permanently. Each one was a moment when this man had been standing between something dangerous and something worth protecting, and had chosen to remain standing. She stood very still and felt the shame of her first 40 minutes in his company settle through her like something with weight.
The deep laceration along his ribs needs hospital attention,
the paramedic said. The shot grazed him. He's been downplaying it. I'm fine, Ethan said. Lily gets out of school at 3. I'll handle it, Isabella said. He looked at her. It was not a simple look. It was the look of someone who has learned to evaluate offers carefully. Because offers from people like her sometimes had costs embedded in the fine print. Why? He said. She did not have a polished answer. She had a true one. Because you bled for strangers. For me. After I spent an hour trying to make you feel small. She held his gaze. Please let me do this one thing. He gave her the school name and his ex-wife's contact for the pickup list. He gave her these things in the way of someone extending trust as a deliberate choice rather than a reflex, which made it mean more than it would have otherwise. As the paramedics moved him toward the ambulance, Isabella climbed in without asking permission. At the hospital, she met Lily. Lily had her father's gray eyes and his quality of paying attention, and she approached the situation. Her father in a hospital bed, a stranger sitting in the chair beside him, with the pragmatic seriousness of a child who has learned that the world sometimes requires quick recalibration. She asked precise questions about his injuries and accepted the answers without theatrics. Then she looked at Isabella. Is this the princess lady? She asked. The what? Daddy said he was meeting a princess today, someone who lives in a tower and doesn't come down much. I said she was successful, Lily, Ethan said, and he had the specific expression of a man who would like to be somewhere he could control. You said she was sad, Lily corrected, with the brutal precision of someone who has not yet learned that this kind of accuracy is sometimes socially unwelcome. You said sometimes people build towers so high they forget how to come down. Isabella was quiet for a moment. That's not wrong, she said. Lily considered this with great seriousness. Then she pulled a book from her backpack and offered it to Isabella. You can read to Daddy while I do my homework. He likes when people read to him, but he pretends he doesn't. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Isabella took the book. She was in her penthouse at midnight, standing in front of the wall of framed magazine covers, and for the first time in 3 years she looked at them and felt something other than satisfaction. She had been featured in 17 publications. She had been called a titan, a disruptor, a force. The woman in those photographs wore her success with the ease of someone for whom success had always been inevitable. That woman had been absolutely useless in a cafe at 11 in the morning when a gun came out. What had mattered was Ethan's voice, steady as a metronome when her own breath had come in gasps. What had mattered was his body between her and the gun. What had mattered, in the moment when Tommy was pointing a weapon at the back of his head, was the quality in Ethan's voice that had reached through a desperate man's panic and found the human being underneath. She had spent 3 years learning to be harder than everyone else. In 45 minutes, she had learned that hardness was not the same as strength. She picked up her phone. She set it down. She picked it up again. The contact was saved under mechanic, which she had typed with the deliberate dismissiveness of someone cataloging something beneath notice. She changed the name to Ethan and went to bed. She found them at the park the following morning. He was on a bench, moving carefully, his ribs bandaged under a gray t-shirt, and he winced when he shifted position. The small involuntary expression of someone trying to minimize something they do not want observed. Lily was on the swings, pumping her legs with the complete commitment of a child for whom each moment is a complete project. Isabella approached slowly. She was wearing jeans and a sweater, clothes she had ordered specifically for occasions that did not require armor, which meant she rarely wore them. She was carrying a coffee tray and a bag from a bookstore. "Hi," she said, "Isabella." He looked genuinely surprised, which was rare and oddly satisfying. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to check on you both." She offered him the coffee, black, no sugar, as she had observed. "And I brought something for Lily." She pulled out the book, a story about a brave knight who was also a brilliant engineer. The knight on the cover was a girl with a tool belt and an expression of absolute determination. Lily materialized from the swings as if summoned by the presence of a new book, examined the cover with professional thoroughness, and said, "The knight is a girl." "The strongest knights sometimes are," Isabella said. Lily considered this for exactly 1 second. "Like you with the fire extinguisher. Daddy told me you hit the bad man." A pause. "That was brave. Your dad was the brave one." "Daddy's always brave," Lily said, as if this were a mathematical constant. "But he said you were brave too. Even though you were scared, he said that's the best kind of brave." She tucked the book under her arm and ran back toward the swings, apparently satisfied that this conversation had reached its natural conclusion. Ethan shifted on the bench and made room. "Sit down," he said. She sat. The distance between them was the specific distance of two people who have been through something together and are uncertain what that means for the space between them. "I owe you an apology," she said. "Several." "You were protecting yourself," he said. "I could see it from the beginning, the way you held your phone like a shield, the way you kept scanning the room. Something happened to you. Something that made you decide attack was safer than vulnerability." She stared at him. "How did you?" "Same way you probably noticed. I fold my napkins in military corners and check every room twice when I enter." A pause. Trauma recognizes trauma. The simplicity of it broke something she had not known was intact. She told him about the cathedral, the $40,000 dress and the empty accounts, and the 200 witnesses to the worst moment of her life. He listened the way he had listened in the cafe, not with sympathy managed into the right expressions, but with the quality of attention given by someone who has learned that listening is a precision skill. "I came back from Afghanistan with pieces missing," he said when she had finished. "Not physical pieces, those healed, but parts of me that knew how to trust, how to relax, how to believe the world was basically safe. My ex-wife tried to love me back to who I was before, but that person died in Kandahar with my squad mate. All I could do was build something new from what was left." They were quiet for a moment. Lily pumped her legs on the swing, reaching for the sky with each arc. "I don't know how to not be who I've become," Isabella admitted. "This morning at my office, I caught myself about to humiliate an intern for a minor formatting error. It's muscle memory now. Strike first, maintain distance. Unlearning survival mechanisms when you no longer need them takes practice," he said. "Lily helps. Kids don't let you maintain distance. They need all of you, not just the parts you've decided are safe. I don't know anything about children. Nobody does until they have to learn." He looked at the coffee in his hands. "I don't actually like coffee," he said. "I don't either," she said. "I drink it because CEOs are supposed to run on caffeine and ambition. I drink it because that's what normal people do on coffee dates. Burnt, bitter, and necessary. Reminds me of deployment. The absurdity of it, both of them performing normalcy with a beverage neither of them wanted, struck her as genuinely funny, and she laughed in a way that surprised her with its completeness. Ethan laughed too, then winced and pressed his hand against his ribs, which made her laugh more. "We're quite a pair," she said, and did not quite mean it as a joke. Lily came running back and grabbed both their hands simultaneously. "Come push me on the swings, both of you." And so they did. Isabella on one side, Ethan on the other, synchronizing their pushes until Lily was shrieking with delight, and the park was full of the sound of a 7-year-old who had decided, in the uncomplicated way of children, that this was how things should be. Ethan's hand brushed hers. He did not pull away. Neither did she. "I'd like to try again," she said. "The date, I mean, without the robbery." "I'm not easy to be with," he said. "I have nightmares. I check exits compulsively. Sometimes I disappear into my head for hours and can't find my way back. Lily comes first, always, without negotiation." "I work too much," she said. I have trust issues that need their own postal code. I'll say something cruel by accident because cruelty is my default setting, and I have no idea how to be part of something instead of in charge of it. Ethan looked at her, and something in his expression was quietly, reluctantly amused. Sounds like we're perfect for each other. Tuesday, she said. Same cafe. They're reopening with upgraded security. I'm still not sitting with my back to the door. I wouldn't expect anything else. Tuesday came unseasonably warm, spring asserting itself against the last week of winter's reluctance. The cafe had new windows, reinforced, catching the light differently, and a security guard near the entrance whose eyes carried the specific exhaustion of someone who had seen enough of the world's possibilities to be perpetually watchful. Isabella recognized the quality of his vigilance and understood, now, what it meant. Ethan arrived exactly on time. When he extended his hand in greeting, she took it properly and felt the calluses that she had once noted as evidence of limitation and now understood as evidence of work that mattered. Fixing engines. Building a treehouse designed to survive hurricanes. Holding his daughter's hand through the particular storms of a life structured around love rather than acquisition. They ordered tea and talked for 3 hours. He told her about Sarah, how they had met at an air show, how she had insisted he was too serious, how 2 deployments had not broken them, but the third had changed him into someone she could love but no longer live with. I lost the ability to care about small things, he said. Couldn't pretend that missing a dinner reservation mattered after you've watched what matters actually cost. He stirred his tea. She's happy now. Married a teacher. He's soft in all the ways I'm hard. Better for her, and better for Lily to see that there are different kinds of men. She told him about the reconstruction of herself, not abstractly, but in specific detail. The first hostile takeover, the satisfaction of it, the specific moment she understood that what felt like strength was actually fear wearing better clothes. The way she had stopped being able to sit across from people without calculating their weaknesses. I thought money was armor, she said. Power was a weapon. I was successful and empty. I'd won everything and had nothing. Were you safe? He asked. Not even slightly, she said. Just alone in a way that felt like safety because nothing could get in. He reached across the table and turned her hand over and looked at the palm for a moment, the way you examine something that has been held wrong. Then he set her hand back down on the table. I have to pick up Lily, he said reluctantly. Can I come? The question surprised both of them. When Lily saw them both at the school gate, she ran over with her backpack bouncing and grabbed Isabella's hand as naturally as she grabbed her father's, and the 3 of them walked toward the parking lot in the low afternoon light, and something in Isabella's chest that had been requiring a great deal of maintenance opened without permission and stayed open. The soccer field on Saturday was muddy from recent rain and full of small people with enormous determination and minimal technical skill. Isabella stood on the sideline, wearing rain boots that cost more than most people's car payments and felt more present than she had in years. She cheered when Lily kicked the ball, which was often in the wrong direction, and laughed when the entire team chased it in a clump. The parent beside her handed her a section of orange and she ate it without thinking about it, which was not something she usually did. At the pizza place afterward, she helped Lily with her juice box and listened to the case for why Tyrannosaurus Rex was the single most important animal to ever exist. Other parents included them naturally in conversations about school fundraisers and upcoming field trips, and Isabella nodded and offered opinions and felt the unfamiliarity of being simply a person in a room rather than the most senior person in a room. Later, after Lily was asleep and the apartment had taken on the quality that apartments take on when a child has been present and then stopped being present, somehow both quieter and warmer, Isabella and Ethan stood in his kitchen. He was making coffee. Neither of them wanted it. I don't know how to do this, she said. Be part of something small and real and important. Neither do I, he said. I know how to survive, how to protect, how to compartmentalize. But this, he gestured between them in a way that was imprecise and therefore more accurate than precision would have been, this terrifies me more than any firefight. Why? In combat, the worst thing that happens is you die. He looked at the coffee he was not drinking. Here, the worst thing is Lily gets attached and then gets hurt. Or I let you in and you realize I'm too damaged, too difficult, too much work. She set her coffee down and crossed the kitchen to him. What if I'm just as damaged? What if we're both too much work? What if that makes us right for each other? Because we already understand the cost of rebuilding. She looked up at him. You talked a man out of shooting you with empathy. I swung a fire extinguisher at an armed criminal without deciding to. We've already established that we do something different together than we do alone. He looked at her for a long moment. This woman who had walked into his life with cruelty and designer shoes and was now standing in his kitchen without armor, asking him to choose something difficult and true. He kissed her, gently, and with the care of someone who understood that this particular thing could be easily broken. Nothing like the passion she'd been trained to expect from movies and from the men who had wanted her as a trophy. No conquest, just connection. The question of two people asking, very quietly, if this could be something. She kissed him back, her hand against his chest, feeling the strong, uneven rhythm of a heart that had survived things she was only beginning to understand. 3 months became 6, became a year, and the texture of the time was made of specific things rather than summaries. Tuesday mornings, when Ethan had been awake since 3:03, the nightmare pulling him back to a terrain that no longer existed, and Isabella woke to find him not in bed and went to the garage where he worked on the engine of a 1967 Mustang until his hands stopped shaking, and she brought him a glass of water and sat on the workbench and said nothing until the shaking stopped. The board meeting where she had a vice president in tears before she registered that she was doing it again, and the drive afterward to the park, sitting on the same bench where she had first apologized to him, working through what the cruelty had been a response to. Not to justify it, but to understand it well enough to interrupt it earlier next time. The afternoon Ethan showed her how to change oil, his hands over hers on the wrench, explaining the sensation of the right amount of resistance, and Isabella understood the metaphor without him having to make it. The evening Isabella sat at Ethan's kitchen table with her laptop and Lily beside her with colored pencils, taking an emergency call from her risk team about a market fluctuation, and Lily leaned over and drew a small dinosaur in the margin of the spreadsheet printed for the call, and Isabella delivered the rest of the analysis with a stegosaurus in the lower left corner and felt, for the first time since the cathedral, that her life had a center that was not made of ambition. The house in Brooklyn had a yard that needed work and a garage that made Ethan go quiet in the way he went quiet when something was exactly right. 3 bedrooms and 2 baths and walls that would eventually be covered in Lily's artwork, and the accumulated evidence of 3 people sharing space by choice rather than necessity. Moving day arrived in April, boxes everywhere, and Lily directing operations with the authority of a small general who had specific requirements about the positioning of her dinosaur collection in the new purple room. That evening, when Lily was asleep and the unpacked boxes surrounded them like the standing stones of a new life not yet fully assembled, they sat on the back porch and looked at the city lights visible above the roof lines, and the night was warm enough to stay. Regrets? Isabella asked. No, he was quiet for a moment, just thinking about paths, how I needed to go through hell to find this. How you needed to build those walls to learn to take them down. How a violent robbery at a Manhattan cafe became our origin story. We should probably tell people we met at a coffee shop, Isabella said. Leave out the guns. Lily won't let us. She's already told her entire class that you're a princess who fought bad guys with a fire extinguisher. Isabella laughed. Then she grew still for a moment, looking at the city lights. I almost didn't come back that Tuesday, she said. I almost decided it was too complicated, too much chance of things going wrong. I almost chose the tower. What changed your mind? Lily said you told her I was sad. And I thought, she stopped. I thought, if a 7-year-old can see it that clearly, maybe I don't have to work quite so hard to hide it. He took her hand. His fingers were calloused and careful and held hers, without either possessiveness or tentativeness, just with the ordinary sureness of someone who has decided that this is where they want their hand to be. We saved each other, he said. You reminded me there's life beyond survival. I reminded you there's strength beyond conquest. That's a very clean way to put it, she said. I've been working on it. 5 years after the robbery, Isabella stood in their garage with her hands inside the engine of the Mustang, which had been rebuilt and disassembled and rebuilt again twice more. Her expensive clothes were upstairs in the closet, reserved for boardrooms where she was still fierce. More precisely fierce now, with the efficiency that comes from knowing what you're protecting, rather than just what you're afraid of losing. She had learned to distinguish between the two. Ethan was at the workbench, explaining something about timing to Lily, who was taking notes in the serious way of someone who intends to use the information. The garage smelled of oil and sawdust and the particular smell of old metal being returned to usefulness. "Mom," Lily said. She had started calling Isabella that 2 years ago, naturally, without announcement, the way children sometimes install new arrangements without requiring adult approval. "Can you help me with this math after?" "After we finish this," Isabella said, hands still in the engine. "Your dad's teaching me about combustion." Ethan caught her eye over Lily's head. His smile was brief and unhurried, and still, after 5 years, capable of making her feel something her previous self would not have had vocabulary for. This was their life. Ordinary and extraordinary in the way that all real lives are ordinary and extraordinary simultaneously. Built on coffee they didn't drink and violence they'd survived, and the radical act of choosing to trust after trust had been catastrophically broken. They had learned that love was not the absence of damage but the presence of grace, that families were not born but built, deliberately and imperfectly, one Tuesday at a time, that sometimes the worst first date could become the best life. If you were willing to go back on Tuesday, sit across from someone who had already seen you at your least offended, and try again. In Brooklyn, in a house that always needed something fixed, with a purple room and a garage that smelled of possibility, they had found the thing that Isabella had been building towers to protect herself from ever needing. They had found home.